Welcome to the Marlene Saunders show, where we have real talk and real conversations, and you're welcome to it. Hey, everybody. Welcome back. I'm back for another season. I just finished the premiere of Sharonda, and I'm going to have it linked in the comment section when this live is over. Welcome, everybody, to today's show. I'm going to be talking to you about a really important topic, and that's of after effects of the pandemic. And I want to talk to you about this because it's something that I don't hear a lot of people talk about, but I want to talk about it today. So let me welcome everybody who is in the chat. Hey, sis, Lashes. So good to see you. Welcome in. And anybody who would like to, I invite you to come up. You can turn your camera on or you can turn your camera off, but you're welcome to come up if you would like to talk about something that maybe I'm not covering, or if you want to share your personal testimony, you're welcome because this is an open panel. So, first of all, I just want to talk about from my perspective some of the things that I've gone through for myself. And it's a little hard for me to talk about, but here on this channel, I talk about real talk and real conversations. So I just want to be transparent and honest. In on May 2nd of 2020, no, 21, 2021, that's when my brother passed away. And this was during the pandemic, still, everything that was happening during that time, we weren't allowed to go and see people in the hospital. We weren't allowed to even go in the hospital if something happened. Even when my brother had passed away, they didn't even allow family members to come and say goodbye. Everything was restricted and cut off. And I understand, they were just trying to protect everybody, but it makes it really hard for family members and friends to have a way to close that chapter in your life. It's something that happens when you can't say goodbye. It's like I still feel, even till this day, I don't feel closure because I didn't get to see him. And for me, it was like, did he know that I cared about him because I wasn't there? And I know that that's not true because it's not equate, because we used to talk to each other and all of that. So I want to ask anybody in the audience, or even if you're watching on the replay, have you lost anybody during the pandemic, and how were you coping with it? And for myself personally, the after effects of the pandemic for me was I didn't get closure to say goodbye to my brother. And that left kind of like a scar on my heart. And it made me feel like, am I a bad sister? Am I a bad person because I wasn't there? Was he waiting to see me? It's all of those questions that came in my mind. And that's affected my healing and my grieving process, because for me, because I never got to say goodbye to him, sometimes I even forget that he has passed away because I didn't see him. I didn't get to say my goodbye. So it's like I still look sometimes to pick up the phone and say, I'm going to call my brother. And I can't. It's one of those scars that you have on your heart that's going to be there forever. I can't change what was happening in society. But I do want to talk about the after effects of the pandemic for myself. And for me, the pandemic caused me to grieve in a completely different way. I even feel like the pandemic kind of caused me to not even to be able to grieve to grieve like I wanted to, because there's something about not seeing people, not holding their hand, not being able to shed tears when you're supposed to shed tears. Um, One thing that I did do during the pandemic was we did a Zoom funeral for him. I would say 2 months later or a month later. I can't really remember because all of that time has been like a blur. But for myself, I found that it's difficult for me to even till today. It still feels like a fresh wound because I never got to have closure. So I've tried to do a few things. I did a Zoom funeral because we weren't even able to go to the funeral because at that time they restricted how much people could go into the funeral home, how much, they were saying only 4 or 5 people. And 4 or 5 people, my brother had 7 children. So if you're saying 4 or 5 people and my brother was married, that means that number one, his wife was there. But then you have to choose family members who's going to be able to go and say goodbye. You know, that's an issue with that, the kids never being able to say goodbye. It's an issue because all of the siblings and friends and other people who loved him, we could never say goodbye. So I just wanted to start off by letting you guys know that that was the first of the after effects for the pandemic for me. Another part of the after effects of the pandemic is the pandemic caused us like fear, because I remember when the pandemic just started, I didn't really know what was happening. When the pandemic happened, I had no idea what was happening, and we weren't getting a lot of explanations about what it was. So, because we didn't know, I had like this mass hysteria like, can you catch it by somebody sneezing on you? Can you catch it by this? Can you catch it by that? And because I didn't know, then I felt like I developed a sort of OCD, like over cleaning, over washing clothes, over washing my hands, because they didn't really tell us what it was really about, because they themselves didn't know. So that was another thing that I had developed. And also working in healthcare, they kind of forced on healthcare workers or a lot of people, you were forced to wear a mask, you were forced to wear gowns, you were forced to get vaccinated, or you lost your job. Now, I'm not telling anybody else what to do, what to think, but for me, I was not a person who wanted to do any of those things. So it took a toll on my finances. It took a toll on me emotionally because I didn't know until the pandemic hit that I had a problem wearing masks. When I put on a mask, I feel like I can't breathe. I feel like I'm going to have a panic attack. And that's something that I would never know because before that time, I never had to wear a mask. That was another one of the after effects of the pandemic that happened for me. I had to learn that it was okay. It was okay for me to panic. It was okay for me to not understand. And I want to speak to those who went through something hard during the pandemic. Maybe you lost a family member. Maybe you lost your job. There's a lot of things that happened during this time that made it really difficult. And I know another thing that happened during the pandemic, a lot of people broke up, romantic relationships. A lot of things happened because, of course, during the pandemic, we were shut in. We didn't have the ability to go and do things that we really wanted to do. You were kind of just shut in, and we were told that we couldn't go anywhere. And if you went somewhere, it was illegal and you could get arrested. So there was a lot of things that you were kind of confined to stay with who you were with at that time. And of course, if you don't get along, there was a lot of breakups that happened. And the after effects of that was you really find out who you're with. You really find out how nice a person can be when you're surrounded by them. You find out, really, is this a good person for me or not? And that happened for me too. I had a breakup during the pandemic as well. I had a breakup. I lost my brother in death. I lost my job. So there was a lot of losses that happened to me during the pandemic. And at one point, I felt like I was going crazy. I thought I was losing my mind. I thought, like, why is all of this happening to me? And it was so difficult for me to even process it, because how do you process losing your brother in death and you can't go see him? How do you deal with not being able to say goodbye? How do you tell somebody, I'm sorry that I wasn't there for you? And I just had to learn how to process it for myself. I had to learn that it was okay that I am sad. It's okay to grieve, even though I couldn't be there in person. I recommend anybody who has lost their family member in death, I hope you have found something that helps you to cope with it, because I had to learn from my own self that I have to learn how to cope with this loss. A lot of people aren't talking about this topic, and this is a real conversation. This is an honest conversation. I'm trying my best to be transparent in hopes that it's going to help somebody else. So if you had a loss, you know, someone passed away, or you had a loss where your relationship broke up during the pandemic, you had a loss where you lost a friend, when you had a loss, when you lost a job, all of these are losses in our life. And it's very difficult to cope with all of these things, especially because during that time you weren't able to hug people. I think that's one of the things that hurt me the most during the pandemic is you lost somebody, they're not here, and then you couldn't grieve how you want to, because I wasn't able to go and hug my brothers and sisters. I wasn't able to, you know, get together and see his body. I wasn't able to look at him one more time before he was put in the casket. And all of that kind of pulls on you, because it makes you feel like, is he really gone because I didn't see him? Is, you know, and another thing that happened during the pandemic is you really found out who your real friends are. I really found out who my real friends are, because if you can't go and see anybody anymore and you're only dependent on phone calls, everything went back old school to, you had to call somebody, you had to write somebody a letter. And the new thing is sending an email or doing FaceTime. So it's about, what is somebody willing to do to show that they're your friend or they're your loved one. And this is what I found during the pandemic, that you really find out who your real friends are. You really find out who is your real family and who is going to ride for you and rock with you. And unfortunately, during the pandemic, I found out that I didn't have a lot of friends. I found out that the people who were even related to me by blood really didn't care much about me and care much about how I was feeling. And I had to learn that it's okay. I had to learn to be okay with who I am outside of them. And I want to encourage anybody who is wondering, why can't I have good friends? Why don't our people here supporting me? Don't worry about those people. Don't worry about them, because the right people will be there and the wrong people will go away. I want to encourage you with that. The right people will be there and the wrong people will go away. So if you ever had a loss, if you lost a friend, if you lost a family member, if your friendships broke up, if your romantic relationships broke up, just know that you're not alone and everything happens for a reason. We sometimes outgrow relationships. Sometimes it's shown to us right in front of our face that this person really isn't a good friend. This person really doesn't appreciate you or understand you. Or maybe you've grown apart. You've grown in separate directions. All of that is okay. Don't take it as nobody cared about me, because that's what I thought during the pandemic, because I wasn't able to see people and hug them. I'm naturally an affectionate person. So the after effect of the pandemic hit me really hard, because if your love language is hugs and kisses and spending quality time together, and then all of that is cut off, how do you cope with it? It's like a hole. It's like a gaping hole that was left in my heart, and I felt so lonely and abandoned. And the people around me, I know that I had people around me that loved me, but for me, phone calls wasn't enough. You know, Getting text messages, that was not enough. Getting a letter, that was not enough. I need to see people. I need to hug people. And for those of you who really struggled during the pandemic and you spent time crying a sea of tears, know you're not alone. There's a lot of people who are still struggling to put things together to even process this, because what happened, it wasn't a natural thing. That's what my conclusion had to be, that it wasn't a normal thing that happened to us. It's not normal to be separated from friends and family and people that you love, but you had to do it. It was important and necessary in order to save your life. All of those things, it's not that I don't understand. It's not that we as intelligent human beings don't understand that we needed to stay separate, but tell that to your heart. Tell that to your head, that you don't process this and understand that all I would think is, I miss certain people. I want to hug them. I miss seeing their faces. So, almost 3 years in, and supposedly they say that the pandemic is over. I have a different opinion, but a lot of after effects has come from the situations that has happened to me and for a lot of people around the world. Another one of the after effects of this is a lot of people lost their job. So it affected, hundreds of thousands of people. I would even say maybe 1 million people were affected by this. Losing your job, a lot of places closed down, because especially places that were food service or things like that. That's a big thing that happened in the pandemic. So many businesses closed, and it's not good for a business to close, because it affects the economy and it affects the people who work there. But I understand, to have a business, you have to make money. And when you're not making money, a business has to shut down. So within all of that, people lost their job. So when people lose their job, what happens? People lose their homes. A lot of people were evicted when the pandemic happened. And that's a lot of scarring that happened. It did not happen to me, but I read of so many people, because they didn't have stable employment, they weren't able to pay their bills. And some people were evicted during the pandemic. And that is tragic. You're already going through so many things, you know, not being able to see people, and then the constant harassment. That's another thing that happened during the pandemic that drove me crazy. Companies calling and asking, "Where is the money? When are you going to pay me for whatever bill it was?" And they didn't care that you were working. Most of the time, people don't care that you don't have the money to pay a bill. People don't care about that. They're a business. They need to make money. And I found that to be very frustrating to be called and called. When are you going to pay us? When are you going to pay us? And you don't have the money, and you're constantly being harassed, and you're looking for a job, and they don't understand why you can't get a job. Very frustrating. And a lot of people, they went through a lot of things just like I did. Losing your job, seeing your job shut down. A lot of people had to reinvent themselves during the pandemic. I feel like that was one of the good things that happened through the pandemic. I myself too, I had to reinvent myself. There's some jobs that when the pandemic hit, you just you just can't do that anymore, because for 2 years, some places 3 years before things finally started opening up again, you couldn't sustain yourself financially all of that time. So a lot of people had to reinvent themselves. The job maybe that they were doing, some people had to learn new skills. Some people had to go to school to learn those new skills. Some people had to try something new. A lot of people started businesses during the pandemic, and all of that is wonderful. That's the good side of the pandemic. That's the part of the pandemic that I loved, that it gave you an opportunity to start new and to start fresh. And I just wanted to come on here and to encourage anybody who is still struggling. Every day I wake up, I still deal with the after effects of the pandemic, even though it supposedly is over. Supposedly the pandemic is over, but my heart doesn't say so. I constantly deal and struggle with my brother is not here anymore. I lost some good friends. I broke up during the pandemic. But you got to encourage yourself. You got to encourage your heart. It's a lot of people who have sustained a lot of emotional, mental scarring. And I want you to know it's okay if you need to get some therapy. Talk to somebody. It's okay to talk to somebody and say, hey, I'm not dealing with this well. I had to do that. I had to reach out to a therapist and say, I'm finding a hard time coping with losing my brother. And one of the things that the therapist told me, because I reached out with a virtual visit to a therapist, and they said, well, what are you doing for yourself? So that's one of the things that, if you're still struggling since all of this is happening, you have to reevaluate yourself. What am I doing? You know, we may not be able to change what happened at that time, but we can always change our outlook towards the situation. But what are you doing for yourself? And it's hard. It's hard to want to do things for yourself because it's a hole in your heart that can never be filled. That hole can never be closed. But what you can do is start doing some things for yourself. Maybe for your loved one. I know my brother used to love to listen to music. And how I cope with it, I listen to the music that we used to love to listen to together. And that brings me some peace. And for those of you who lost friends during the pandemic, I wouldn't even say it called you lost friends during the pandemic. I think that the wrong ones fell out of your life. That's the way I like to look at it. The wrong people fell out of your life during the pandemic because they were acting crazy, because they wouldn't do right. Now is your opportunity to find yourself some new friends, some good friends, people who aren't going to use you, people who aren't going to manipulate you and play games, people who don't have drama in their life. See, you don't need to have manipulative people. You don't need people who are users. You don't need those type of people in your life. You deserve to have someone who will spend time with you, who will check in on you. I spoke about this earlier in my other live stream. You can't make people grow up. You can't make people do right by you. That's something that we can't do. We can't make a grown person act like a grown up. Unfortunately, some people don't act their age, they act their shoe size. But I learned how to grow up and mature and to use wisdom. And it takes a lot of strength to not go off on people and to, not say, why don't you do this? Why? See, don't chase people around. Don't force relationships. Don't force people to check on you. Don't force people and say, let's spend time. And you're the only person who is coming up with an idea for you to get together. See, a friendship goes both ways. And even people who are your family, you can't be the only one pursuing the relationship. And the same thing that happens in a romantic relationship. You can't be the only person to pursue the relationship. Another person has to pursue it as well. And I just want you to know, if you don't have good people in your life, now is your wonderful opportunity for you to reinvent yourself, to draw out and seek people who are looking for the same things you are. Sometimes we lower our standard for no reason. I don't want you to lower your standards. I want you to elevate your standards. You don't deserve to have the garbage people, the people who are dragging you down, the people who weigh down your head and heart, the people who are only reaching out to you with their hands stretched out for you to give them some money. See, you don't need those type of people. Those people needed to get lost during the pandemic, and a lot of them did fall off. So don't worry about the people who fell off. Don't worry about the people who don't support you. I just wanted to come on and talk to you guys about the after effects of the pandemic, what happened for me. I had a lot of losses, but after a while, I had to make a decision that I wasn't going to let those situations bring me down. And I'm giving you the same encouragement. If you had a lot of losses, whatever it is that you lost during the pandemic, I hope it's better for you now. I hope you were able to reinvent yourself. I hope you're keeping your head up. I hope you're maintaining your positive attitude. And I hope that you found new friends who are going to encourage you and support you to do better. See, sometimes we go through situations in our life for us to be able to open our eyes and be aware. Those people who were stagnant in your life are the people who are only got their claws in you for what they can take from you like a leech. They only wanted to take from you. And you don't have to do that. You don't have to put up with it. You deserve way better than what you're getting. You deserve better. And I just want you to know that. Keep your head up. Stay positive. And this was a real talk and real conversation. I am Marlene, and I am the content creator for the Marlene Saunders Show and podcast, where I have real talk and real conversations, and you are welcome to it. Thank you so much for joining me. If you're new to the channel, I would love for you to subscribe, hit the like, and leave me a comment in the comment section below. Have you gone through a hard time and difficulty in the pandemic? I encourage you, reinvent yourself, keep your head up, find genuine friendships, people who support you, because support is a two-way street. And if you're not getting that, it's your time to cut ties with those type of people. I thank you so much for joining me today, and I will see you on the next Marlene Saunders Show, where we have real talk and real conversations, and you're welcome to it.
Be encouraged, be inspired, be yourself.